All right, welcome to the Ravit Show. Look who I have with me, Zhamak, founder and CEO of Nextdata. Super excited to host you, long time due, and finally we meet. And I'm so excited to be here in San Francisco at the Ferry Building. Such a good weather, and I'm excited about everything that's happening at Nextdata. I want to learn more about what's happening in the data mesh world, data product, much more. But just for audience, and I'm pretty sure the audience knows you very well, but just want to know a little about yourself, what you're working on, what's
Sure.
happening at Nextdata.
Sure. Well, great to
Finally meet, right?
finally meet and
Yeah.
meet in person, and meet in person in San Francisco, which is great. Yeah. So I guess for your audience, I'm Zhamak. My
Yeah.
I guess 30 second to fame is the creator of. I'm known as the creator of Data Mesh. I talked about data mesh, or introduced it, I guess, to the industry about 5 years ago now, and I continued evangelizing and building it for multiple Fortune 500 companies. And at some point, I decided that we need a technology to make this a reality. And
True.
then I started Nextdata about I don't know under 2 years ago now.
Wow. And since the time you've announced the company, I've been closely following the journey. I've obviously chatted with you, and I know how much hard work you've been putting into it, and you're building something which is actually going to change massively the data world. It's going to be very useful for the enterprise leaders as well, and that's one of the reasons I was like, I'm in San Francisco. I can't miss the opportunity to chat with Jamak. Okay, so and I'm pretty sure the audience would also want to know about data mesh. We've been,
Sure.
you've been the spokes for data mesh, and we've, obviously seen you doing so much in the space. But what is the current state of data mesh? Where do you
Sure.
see it going? How does the landscape look like currently?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so I think, data mesh has started a wave and a change that is unstoppable.
True.
Whether companies call it data mesh or call it data fabric or data federation or the next level virtualization or democratization, we give it many different labels, but one thread is common across all, which is the desire to push the control of data ownership to business domain and really decentralize this centralized bottleneck of data control and data ownership closer to the business, closer to the market, close to the source of data. So that is really common across many organizations I've directly talked to or worked with over 500, large organizations, 5,000 people above, and
Right.
they all have that need. Nobody comes and say, look, we want to centralize our data again. I mean, embracing that decentralization is part of the strategy of many organizations. However, when you look at where the companies are on the journey of implementation, the story is not as rosy as the
You're
philosophy
right.
of it, right?
Yeah.
There are a
Yeah.
lot of challenges. What we saw was kind of this hyper response to data mesh as a concept by vendors, and every vendor introduced the language of data product. Almost data product has becoming synonymous with data
True.
everywhere. Every catalog, every query engine, every warehouse is now calling data products, right? So I think that happened, but that fundamentally didn't shift how data was produced, how data was controlled, how data was discovered. We're still
Right.
living in this kind of pipeline world of data moving from left to right, from source to value.
Yes.
So then what has happened is that a lot of organizations started building their own build your own or do it yourself data mesh on top of the tooling that exists right now.
Yes.
And that is, as we all know, is very costly. Like build your own kind of layer of infrastructure might be easy to build day one, but day two to day 200 to operationalize it, to add new types of storage, add new types of compute, create a personalized experience for different types of data people in your organization. That's a very, very costly and difficult challenge. So I think what I'm seeing right now with the data mesh is that the philosophy is going to long live, hopefully beyond me, and the desire for really democratizing data ownership, not just data discovery, And we are at the point that implementation, needs some critical components for it to come to life.
That's very interesting. And you're right in terms of, obviously the left to right shift in, obviously companies focusing on it. How are you planning to change the mindset? Because I know it's like, okay, for years we've followed that. How do you see, okay, how does the shift happen? What are you, first of all, what were you most motivated? Why were you motivated to start the company? But this is another big challenge where how do you change the mindset?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the mindset largely has changed. I think the behavior hasn't changed because you need tools that change behavior, right? You need tools that are easy to use, simple to grok,
True.
and
Yeah.
they add value with lower cost. And unless you have that, your behavior is not going to change. Like we changed the language from data to data product, but are we really producing data products? Are we really producing data that has quality? Do we really know when data shifts what code generated that data, that association of code and lineage of that kind of transaction that caused the data shift? So for those pain points to go away, we need technology to enable that. And of course,
Right.
I have a thesis what that technology needs to be. That's why I started Nextdata, and yet to be proved or disproved that thesis is correct.
Yes. And what are the gaps that you're seeing currently in the data mesh world? What do you feel that, okay,
Yeah.
folks are still missing out on this?
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe if I tell a little story
Yeah, for sure.
behind it
Yeah.
and the philosophy behind it, when I look at the technologies that have profoundly changed our lives, and they had some foundation of decentralization, Unix, internet, APIs, services, virtualizations, all those technologies had a few things in common, and one of the things is the standardization. So you need some level of a standardization that allows this concept of mesh native data products come to life. As in data products that can be part of an interconnected mesh, doesn't matter on what platform compute happens, doesn't matter what storage happens, doesn't matter how they get discovered, by which catalog. So for me, that there is a standardization layer that is missing in the layer of stack to allow a distributed data product creation and sharing and discovery.
Right.
And that's kind of the piece that we want to do. Essentially like the poorest, I guess, analogy I can use here is what Docker and Kubernetes did for services and applications.
Right.
We want to do that for a very fragmented and complex set of technologies that constitutes the data world. And then on top of it, build a simple kind of experience of creating and developing data products with a set of APIs that allow that data product gets connected to the catalog of choice or to the discovery tool of choice or the governance tool of choice. So that's kind of our mission is put this complex data ecosystem in a box and wrap it around the developer experience. And we're not opinionated about, we're opinionated about what goes in the box and what the APIs around the interaction with that box and the rest of the world looks like. But we're not opinionated in terms of, how you write your code. If the code that, is part of the data product is Python, is SQL, is an agent talking to LLM model. Like those things should be very diverse. So that encapsulation orchestration is the piece that we want to contribute to.
This is awesome. Thanks for sharing those insights. Also, quickly wanting to learn a little about Nextdata as well. So, obviously, I know about the product now, since we have spoken on off air, and I know what you're building. But just for our audience, would you like to tell them what you're building with Nextdata, and how does it solve the problem for the data folks out there?
Sure. Yeah. So right now, you go to an enterprise, and when we think about the problem, one of the problems that exists is this fragmentation of the data tooling. Not so much fragmentation of, there is a problem of fragmentation of data, that where data lives and in what format, right?
True.
That's, and we are, we also embrace this concept that data should live wherever it lives, and you can have different ways of computing that and processing that. But that's not, that there's still another layer of fragmentation that for a data, kind of executive, they have to stitch together a ton of different technologies to really control and bring quality to the process of data generation. They have to buy a data tooling, around quality. They have to buy a data lineage tool. They have to metadata tool. Like that, there's so much technologies to be able to produce data as a product in a repeatable fashion on a very fragmented spectrum of technologies. You have Databricks in one end of your organization, Snowflake in another, just native Azure or AWS products everywhere. So how do you create, build, share kind of a unified and standardized data product on top of this diverse technology? So that's kind of what we call those mesh native data products. So we're building a technology to do that. So what our technology does is just like Docker that did for encapsulating layers of stack for applications, what we do is we encapsulate your semantic model, we encapsulate your transformation and your code and orchestrate running your transformation. We encapsulate your policies, we encapsulate your metadata, like everything that constitutes a data as a living, breathing application that is changing and is interacting with the universe in a way that then you can have that data product run on different computes and on different storage. It can be discovered by different governance tools or different discovery tools. So it's kind of like Docker Kubernetes of big data, and then we provide developer tooling, simple developer tooling, so that when I'm producing a data as a product, let's say I am an AI engineer or an ML engineer, and I'm building some cohort analysis tool. All I have to think about is, or let's say I'm doing the cohort analysis of the customers. I'm getting information about customers somewhere and doing a profiling based on gender or shopping habits. All I have to think about is the transformation I need to write in my language of choice, in my environment of choice, and define the semantic of that transformation, ultimately what it looks like. What does customer profiling semantic look like? And define my dependencies to upstream data, products or contracts that I expect from my upstream, and define my kind of promises and guarantees to downstream.
Yes.
And very easy and declaratively do that. And then the rest of the packaging, provisioning the infrastructure to make sure your code runs, orchestration of input and output, validating your contracts, externalizing metadata, all of that gets abstracted away. So we manage the full lifecycle management of that data product for that and make the life of, get people to do the right thing easily, right? Generate data in a guided way so that we don't end up with random notebooks lying around and pipelines that when something breaks, you don't have the lineage. So you are building a network of well-managed data really as a product and as an application.
Very interesting. So do you already have some use cases? I know you already have customers. Even before you started the company, you had all the idea. I knew about it, but still, I'm kind of curious to learn a little about the use cases that you would love to share with the audience.
Sure. They fall into different categories. So some of our use cases are around interoperability. So they have, they are producing, one team is producing data on Snowflake with SQL, another team is producing data on Databricks with Python, and there's still silos in terms of discovering that data, trusting it, understanding it. So we're helping with packaging and deploying and running data products across platforms in a unified way, so that the person working in their tool set can still discover and use the data products on a different platform. So it's just this cross-platform discovery and governance of the data products That's one of the use cases. Another use case is bringing some order and repeatability and good just engineering practices or development practices to companies that are generating a lot of analysis and data. So we have, folks that are, they have had tons of notebooks and code and messy pipelines, and then dump the data into the lake, and they don't have lineage, they don't have traceability. So the idea of having CI/CD on top of a unit of code and semantic model, and treating that like an application and putting that into the whole thing into CI/CD and do that in a simple way is another way. So bringing kind of engineering practices to data product development. Those are kind of like two key use cases that we've seen so far.
This is good. Thanks for sharing those details. One last question for our audience, and I'm pretty sure the audience would be like, Ravit, we're just getting to know more about data mesh, and now you're talking about the future. So, how do you see the future of data mesh? Where do you see it going? How will it evolve? And I know we are in that state where we're still learning, and it's where you learn and then you go ahead. But then I'm always like, it's one of my favorite questions. What's next?
Yeah, I think we are moving from an idea of a data democratization that is very limited to almost like hyper democratization. When you think about data democratization today, we only think about consumption of the data. As in, data is produced somehow, we don't know exactly where and when and by whom, and now we need to democratize access to it, right? So we focus so much on the last mile of discovery and govern it and getting access to it, but it's kind of garbage in, garbage out. Yes, you can discover, but it's still garbage being produced by someone that the business is long gone, moved on from the data by the time we get to discover it.
True.
So I think the hyper democratization that needs to happen needs to focus on the data production end. And we need to, the data mesh, what it tried to do when we said domain ownership wasn't domain ownership of discovering, the mess that's there. It was soup to nuts owners, domain owners need to control all the pieces that constitutes and drive generation of the data, not only just discovery of the data, but also creation of the data. And with Gen AI, now we're seeing, proliferation of sources. We only have tapped into 10% of the total data being generated, structured, semi-structured data. Now we need to unlock unstructured data, completely voice, this conversation that you and I are having today. So right now, the next generation tech debt is in the making, like just random pipelines and hacks to unlock data that is sitting on S3 and drives and various places.
True.
So I think the next, really I really hope that idea of the domain ownership, that idea of the data as a product closer to the source, whether it's a conversation you and I are recording or it's data in a database, that needs to come to life with a focus on repeatable processes and practices that allows to generate kind of standardized data applications, data products, again, regardless of the technology underneath and independent of the developer experience tooling that they want to use. So I think that needs to happen. Otherwise, this aspiration of pervasive AI in every application you use and every part of the business is going to fall on its face without decentralized creation of the data, in my mind. So,
Love it. Thanks. Thanks for sharing that. One more question about, and promise this is the last one, about if people want to try Nextdata. Can they do that already?
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually actively working with, we have been working with design partners for a while. Our very first customer implementation is going to production this quarter. So we are super excited to, see the application touching real business data as we speak. And we welcome POCs and pilots for people that are really serious about adopting this concept and also be one of the, some of the early people that put their, fingerprints on formation of this standard that we ideally next year open source at some point. I don't know the exact timing of it, but that's really where our aspirations are. So if people are interested, our website, we have an early access program.
Nice.
to connect with us and we get back, and hopefully we can do some pilots together.
I can share a link with them. So
Thank you.
that's awesome. But Zhamak, it was such a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks for sharing all the great insights. It's always a pleasure chatting with you,
Thank
on air,
you.
off air. I'm looking forward to what's coming for Nextdata. But you've been inspiration for all of us in the data mesh world. Please be that voice and keep us educating.
Thank you. I've been head down a little bit to just try to figure out, what is the smallest piece of technology that can be a catalyst for change? And that's a very hard thing to do. Building technology that is complex and, is easy to do, but building simple technology and transformational technology is very hard. So I'm excited in the coming months to share more about the technology, about the vision, get input from the industry. So there's more to come in the next few months.
More to come, for sure. We'll stay tuned and we'll keep the conversation going as well. Until next time, thanks again for visiting the Ravit Show.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.